Accountability. Adam, where are you? The scriptures declare wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom, and with all you're getting, get understanding. Proverbs 4, verse 7. Accountability. Preface. As part of the For Many Are Called, but Few Are Chosen series, this lesson regarding accountability is the 5th lesson in this 5-part series. If you haven't studied the first 4 parts, I highly recommend you do so before continuing with this lesson. This lesson focuses on bringing together the first 4 parts, which are: there is no cheat code to Yahuah, critical independent thinking, could it be your mindset, Scatterbrained, and Remnant Protocol, the wilderness experience, all to gain an understanding of what Yahuah expects from each of us regarding accountability to the matter of being a righteous spiritual being by abiding by the 2 greatest commandments. While many often like to think they are abiding by the 2 greatest commandments, the evidence is reflected in one's outcomes. Those who are typically speaking the loudest and want to be seen and heard are often seeking validation and approval from others and are not aligned with Yahuah, as his traits are contrary to pride, ego, rants of rhetoric, self-absorption, and gainsayers. When one knows their identity in Yahuah and Yahusha, there is no need to be puffed up like the adversary. The many members of the one body, 1 Corinthians chapter 12, work in tandem with their gifts, talents, skills, and knowledge, without having to operate outside of the uniqueness our Creator, Yahuah, has given us. As the one body of true believers come together and operate in their individuality as a collective in spirit, and in truth, we accomplish the will of Yahuah. What is accountability? Accountability is the big bad word that many people despise. Here's why. Accountability is owning the result or outcome of a situation. Many people run from accountability because the action of responsibility is invoked to complete a task in which they are held responsible. The same principle applies to our spiritual and natural walk. While many try to run from the accountability of their spiritual life, the onus is and will always be on the person. This is why many run from the day of reckoning, the day of judgment. While many are thinking with their lower estate mindset, judgment of Yahuah is not performed by society and a system outside of you, man's judicial system, even though that's what you've been taught and have been subjected and accustomed to by man's standards and not our Creator's. Hence is why the faulty system has been established, appeasing and addressing those who aren't accountable for their actions, and falsely accusing innocent people, which they do from the spirit, and manifest in the natural for the entire world to see the history and wickedness of the spirit that will face judgment at the appointed time. Imagine if everyone had a good moral standing and abided by the 2 greatest commandments. Stay with me. I know it's difficult for many to understand or imagine that such could ever take place, but it can. What the world has become accustomed to is setting up others to establish laws, guidelines, systems, and governance over what you should do, instead of being a person of high good moral standing to do what is right and take accountability for your actions. It has become extremely profitable for those in these positions within the political and religious landscape to now have the authority and power over your accountability or lack thereof. This now opens the door for others who may or may not be morally or spiritually capable of providing equitable education and judgment regarding a matter. This is what we've been seeing for many thousands of years, as it has culminated in what the world is experiencing today, all due to the lack of following the 2 greatest commandments: critical independent thinking, cognitive reasoning skills, taking the narrow gate, and being accountable for one's actions leads to a system, or should I say the matrix, to do it for you. By no means am I saying or condoning that we should not have a government, because we most definitely should have one solidly established on the truth of the word, holding people accountable to the righteousness of our one true Creator, which they aren't and haven't been doing. Now let's look at the following scriptural passage. Romans 14, verses 4 through 12. Who are you that judges another man's servant? To his own master he stands or falls. Yea, he shall be holden up, for Yahuwah is able to make him stand. One man esteems one day above another, another esteems every day alike. Let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind. He that regards the day regards it unto Yahuwah, and he that regards not the day to Yahuwah, he does not regard it. He that eats, eats to Yahuwah, for he gives Yahuwah thanks, and he that eats not to Yahuwah, he eats not, and gives Aluah thanks. For none of us lives to himself, and no man dies to himself. For whether we live unto Yahuwah, and whether we die unto Yahuwah. Whether we live, therefore, or die, we are Yahuwah's. For to this end Mashiach both died, and rose, and revived, that he might be Adonai both of the dead and living. But why do you judge your brother? Or why do you set at naught your brother? For we shall all stand before the judgment seat of Mashiach. For it is written, As I live, says Yahweh, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue shall confess to Yahuwah. So then every one of us shall give account of himself to Yahuwah. So what this passage is speaking about is our responsibility and accountability to others as a collective, which is the body of Mashiach, Yahusha, who belongs to Yahweh. We are not to judge our brother who is in close spiritual kinship or proximity to us. We all must give an account of ourselves and our actions, meaning that we must be accountable for what we do and the reason why we do it. In other words, it's not about you, yet it is. I'm reminded of someone I used to work for in the corporate structure who used to always use a line that I despised, which was, we just need one throat to choke. What is meant or implied is that we need to see who we can hold accountable for a specific action, strategy, task, or failure. As you can probably guess, it was mostly used for the latter, being a failure. I'm referencing this because too many of us look outwardly for one throat to choke instead of taking accountability that sometimes your decision, actions, or lack thereof may be the very throat that needs to be held accountable, especially when one or many placed a person or people to be that person to be held accountable, like the monarchs, politicians, leaders, and government officials that operate our government. Again, as a collective, we are accountable and responsible for the entire body of Yahuwah's assembly. Those who have or have been given the opportunity to lead and guide the assembly in truth are accountable for what the outcomes are. Please keep this in mind as we discuss this more in the lessons. Peter's denial and betrayal. HaMashiach ben Shel Elohim Yahusha, the Messianic son of Elohim, and Habayit Shel Yehuda, the house of Judah, the treacherous one. It is important to identify and recognize. According to Scripture, the government has not been on the shoulders of righteousness, of Yahusha, until this time of his second advent. Now let's look at the scriptural passage of Isaiah 9, verse 2 through 7. The people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. They that dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them has the light shined. You have multiplied the nation, and not increased the joy. They joy before you, according to the joy in harvest, and as men rejoice when they divide the spoil. For you have broken the yoke of his burden, and the staff of his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor, as in the day of Midian. For every battle of the warrior is with confused noise, and garments rolled in blood. But this shall be with burning and fuel of fire. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty Eluah, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end, upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it, and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth even forever. The zeal of Yahuwah of hosts will perform this. Now, through carnal eyes, this passage appears to be one biological baby being born, which is far from the truth. The child that is born is that which is of the spirit of Yahuwah's righteousness, as Yahuwah is spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. John 4:23-24. It is this spirit that was born alive and unalive in Yahusha's. the members of the body, first advent only to be resurrected from the dead over 3 days later, over 3,000 plus years, as a day is of 1,000 years. Psalm 94, 2 Peter 3:8, all to fulfill Yahuwah's plan of salvation. Behold, Yahuwah will carry you away with a mighty captivity, and will surely cover you. He will surely violently turn and toss you like a ball into a large country. There shall you die, and there the chariots of your glory shall be the shame of your Aluah's house. And I will drive you from your station, and from your state shall he pull you down. And it shall come to pass in that day that I will call my servant Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, and I will clothe him with your robe and strengthen him with your girdle, and I will commit my government into his hand, and he shall be a father to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and to the house of Judah. And the key of the house of David will I lay upon his shoulder, so he shall open, and none shall shut, and he shall shut, and none shall open. And I will fasten him as a nail in a sure place, and he shall be for a glorious throne to his father's house. And they shall hang upon him all the glory of his father's house, the offspring and the issue, all vessels of small quantity, from the vessels of cups, even to all the vessels of flagons. In that day, says Yahuwah of hosts, shall the nail that is fastened in the sure place be removed, and be cut down and fall, and the burden that was upon it shall be cut off, for Yahuwah has spoken it. Now let's begin with the obvious that no religious institution or religious leader wants to address. Religious institutions or transgressors utilize the word to weaponize against those who don't read, study, and be able to meticulously point out the facts in spirit and in truth based on history of what is shown through prophecies that were made thousands of years before the manifestation, all for Yahuwah's plan of salvation. This demonstrates the spirit, wisdom, and knowledge which preceded them. In other words, all of these events had to take place for the blessings for some, which were the curses for others, and for the resurrection of the true body and assembly of Yahweh, to stand tall on its feet in the day of Yahweh, his love, reckoning, and vengeance, to bring the body together in understanding what true love of the two greatest commandments really are for his name's sake. Throughout all Yahuwah's plan of salvation, it demonstrates how we individually and collectively are to be accountable and responsible for one another in spirit and in truth. It further demonstrates what the unregenerated man, the adversary, would do that leads to the regeneration of man to be accountable. Adam, where are you? When one observes historical events and the way the world has been operating, we can see the world has been operating without the accountability Yahuwah has instituted in the beginning. Instead, the various types and ways the world have been operating results in more focus on revenue generation for wealthy corporations, organizations, and individuals. The world has been operating on finding loopholes, cheat codes, and other ways to get around a matter for a system that continues to fail them, not knowing what falsehoods and lack of integrity is behind these matters. So, what is accountability? Accountability is a discipline, willingness or obligation to take responsibility for decisions, actions, and their outcomes. Accountability comes with integrity, honesty, veracity, and reliability by being the positive example. The example of true accountability regarding our spirit and this natural world is Yahuwah and Yahusha, in spirit and in truth. In other words, accountability is a lifestyle that stands in the beginning and the end of a spiritual world that exists, while the lower estate mindset of man was ruled by the transgressors between the time of the beginning and the end through the lack of spiritual righteous accountability. Let's review a few scriptures to shed light on matters of Yahuwah's accountability via his word. Matthew 12, verses 33 through 37. Either make the tree good and his fruit good, or else make the tree corrupt and his fruit corrupt, for the tree is known by his fruit. O generation of vipers, how can ye, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. A good man out of the good treasure of the heart bringeth forth good things, and an evil man out of the evil treasure brings forth evil things. But I say unto you, that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give account thereof in the day of judgment. For by your words you shall be justified, and by your words you shall be condemned. So from a comprehension standpoint, I'm hopeful that you can identify which good will be made known. That which is bad and evil will be made known and will give an account for what it has done during the day of judgment. Now, let's review Ezekiel 33, verses 6 through 9. Ezekiel 33, verse 6 through 9. But if the watchman see the sword come, and blow not the trumpet, and the people be not warned, if the sword come, and take any person from among them, he is taken away in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at the watchman's hand. So you, O son of man, I have set you a watchman unto the house of Israel, therefore you shall hear the word at my mouth, and warn them from me. When I say unto the wicked, O wicked man, you shall surely die, if you do not speak to warn the wicked from his way, that wicked man shall die in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at your hand. Nevertheless, if you warn the wicked of his way to turn from it, if he do not turn from his way, he shall die in his iniquity, but you have delivered your soul. There are accountability and responsibility throughout this passage. Do you recognize what responsibilities and accountabilities are in this text? Who is Yahuah speaking to? Let's address a scriptural passage that conveys the lack of accountability that led to the evils of this world. Now, Luke 12, verse 47 through 48 reads as follows, But he that knew not and did commit things worthy of stripes shall be beaten with few stripes. For unto whomsoever much is given, of him shall be much required, and to whom men have committed much, of him they will ask the more. And that servant, which knew his Adonai's will, and prepared not himself, neither did according to his will, shall be beaten with many stripes. This scriptural passage informs the reader that the servant who knew the will of our Creator and did not carry through with his will shall be beaten with many stripes for him. Much was given, and much is required. Let's review another familiar passage, Romans chapter 1, verse 18 through 25. For the wrath of Yahuah is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who hold the truth in unrighteousness, because that which may be known of Yahuah is manifest in them, for Yahuah has shown it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse, because that, when they knew Yahuah, they glorified him not as Yahuah, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the uncorruptible Elohim into an image made like to corruptible man, and to birds, and four-footed beasts, and creeping things. Wherefore Yahuah also gave them up to uncleanness through the lusts of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of Yahuah into a lie, and worshipped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. This scriptural passage speaks to the lack of accountability of honoring and keeping the ways of Yahuah. This passage speaks to the transgressors that went against the righteousness of Yahuah and turned the truth into a lie, which becomes the broad and wide gate that many will follow. Matthew 7:13 to 14. Now, let's talk about how accountability requires faith. Accountability requires faith. A critical component of accountability of the spirit of righteousness of Yahuah is faith. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing the word of Yahuah, Romans 10:17, not the word of man. Everything must be in its proper context, as Yahuah and Yahusha are a spirit of righteousness that reside in many of you, while the spirit of man resides in a third of the collective. We are to walk by faith and not by sight. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 5 through 10. Please review Luke 17, verse 9, Luke 18, verse 42, Acts 16 verse 5, and Acts 26 verse 18 for a few reference scriptures. Additionally, please review the lessons entitled Faith Part 1 and Faith Part 2. That leads us to having accountability partners. In modern times, the term accountability partner is often utilized regarding a person who wants to be held accountable for achieving specific tasks, results, or outcome. The person who seeks an accountability partner typically seeks a knowledgeable person within the area of expertise who can assist them in achieving their desired goals. This requires someone who has your best interests at heart. The same principles apply when wanting to get to know our Creator, Yahuah, in spirit and in truth. Unfortunately, many have partnered with the adversary that led you away from the true accountability partners who would assist you because you and or your ancestors rejected the righteous way and had to learn through the difficult path. Some of you haven't endured the difficult path yet, but no one goes unchecked. This is not stated as a scare or fear tactic. It is simply preparing for truth that often hurts when living in a world of falsehoods and lies that start in the spirit and manifest outwardly. Many have chosen their subconscious mind and an outward expression of a person or institution that indoctrinated, misguided, and led you to thinking and believing in the controlled environment of the matrix, hell on earth, for power, rulership, money, accolades, and notoriety. As members of the body, we are all responsible for being our brother's keeper, individually and collectively, which also means being their accountability partner. So, what does this mean? This means that we are to be there for one another to ensure that we are all being held accountable for our actions, our salvation, our spiritual journey in spirit and in truth. Again, the two greatest commandments assist us in identifying our responsibility to being accountable for ourselves and our actions, being an example, and being accountable to assist others in their spiritual growth and development. This means we are to apply gentle, wise counsel and admonishment until further required actions of letting the world have its way with them apply due to resistance and disobedience. This is exactly how Abba Yahuah disciplines his children, disciples, learners. The rod and staff of Psalms 23 comforts the sheep of his pasture, the individual and collective spiritual mind and body, by guiding and directing the sheep, and not for physical torture and abuse, as many have carnally used the scriptural passage to apply and justify corporal punishment to others. For one seeking righteousness in spirit and in truth, and desiring accountability partners regarding one's spiritual journey, requires the desire for truth, heart of righteousness, and the will of Yahuah and his righteousness. This is accomplished by letting no man deceive you, 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 3, Ephesians 5 verse 6, 1 John 3 verse 7, studying to show yourself approved, 2 Timothy 2 verse 15, lean not to your own understanding, Proverbs 3 verse 5, understanding Yahuwah's ways are not man's ways, Isaiah 55 verse 6 through 11, and trying the Spirit by the Spirit, 1 John chapter 4 verse 1. These accountability partners have been there in the wilderness without the camp, waiting for others to arrive when making their exodus from the matrix, Babylon, the world of chaos and confusion, the successor to Egypt, the house of bondage. These are mindsets. These accountability partners go in strong on teaching truth in spirit and in truth which cuts and divides the spirit of man for a divine separation for the sake of righteousness. Do you have an accountability partner that you can depend on regarding your spiritual life, walk, and journey? Now, who's your private and public enemy? Let's find out. Private and public enemy. Do you care to guess who your private and public enemies are? Keeping it simple, your private enemy is you, the very one who is in the closest proximity to you. Your Creator resides in you when you seek him when he can be found. Isaiah 55 verses 5 through 6. And when you don't, you are sleeping with the enemy. Your private enemy, being you, is your own worst enemy and nemesis. Until one takes accountability of this fact, They will never see, meet, and enjoy the pleasures of Shemayim with their Creator while here on earth. The greatest responsibility and accountability we have is the very core of who we are, which is our spirit, energy, vibration, etc. It is either righteous or unrighteous, which is demonstrated by that which we promote from our mouthpiece and demonstrate in our spiritual journey and walk. The public enemy is the one that I spoke of earlier, allowing you to be misguided, mistaught, lead through the wide gate by religions and traditions of men. This is due to spiritual and intellectual laziness that causes many to seek what appears to be good instead of that which is good. These are those who twist, change, alter, add to, and take away from the word of truth to rule over you. The same applies to your political affiliation, voting for a political party or candidate based on what appears to be good instead of that which is good by the will of Yahuah. When choosing the righteousness of Yahuah individually and collectively in his undefiled, unadulterated, unfiltered, unsealed, and revealed truth, one can be set free. Now, blessings and curses to hold one accountable. Everyone wants to be blessed, right? But what do we do when we are blessed is what counts to Yahuah. Many walk around talking about how blessed they are, yet they don't demonstrate it spiritually or naturally. Many of these people use the term, I'm blessed and highly favored, and don't show it through their actions. In fact, many love to parade this saying while sporting their new clothes, houses, cars, jobs, money, etc., yet they don't show the blessings of the spirit of righteousness by doing the right thing for the right reasons according to the word, which is Yahuah's will. And where can we find most of these individuals? That's right, in or affiliated with the places, churches, synagogues, mosques, temples, etc., made with the hands of men where we aren't to dwell, Acts 7 verse 48 and Acts 17 verse 24. They convince themselves and try to justify to you that they deserve such blessings, and if you continue to pray, you can also be blessed like them. What many of them don't realize is that their blessings will serve them as a curse due to their wicked, evil, and corrupt ways to elevate themselves and make themselves superior to others due to their ill-gotten earthly riches. The same occurs in the political arena, which is why the two of them are joined to the hip. Being blessed is having the spirit of Yahuah, Psalm 104 verse 30, Psalm 139 verse 7 and 8, Isaiah 40 verse 13 and 14, Acts 1 verse 8, Romans 8 verse 14, John 14 verse 17, John 6 verse 63, and Galatians 5 verse 22 and 23, and 1 Corinthians 2 verse 14. Material possessions, power, and rulership does not make one rich in Shemayim. One who is blessed by Yahuah is blessed inwardly with the outward expression that exemplifies his character traits for his name's sake. Now, the curses many don't like to address and talk about. Those that don't identify as getting cursed according to the word. This subject is viewed good when we are blessed and are deemed negative, pessimistic, or cynical when we are cursed. When we reflect and understand the curses placed upon us by this world, through retrospection and introspection of ourselves, we can begin to see the word through the lens of Yahuah and not ourselves or the ways of deceptive man. This brings us to accountability, avoidance, accountability. Avoidance is the behavior of evading, escaping, or circumventing ownership, liability, obligation, responsibility, and answerability of a situation. As humans, we often see this in actions either with ourselves or others regarding day-to-day functionality or the lack thereof. Our achievements and accomplishments are often associated with being accountable, and the contrary is often due to accountability avoidance. If we can identify these matters of the natural, we should understand these matters also apply to our spiritual lives and spiritual accountability. Too many of the inhabitants of the assembly avoid accountability to do what they want to do and not what Yahuah wants or requires us to do. Accountability avoidance is damaging to our spirit and the manifestation that comes from the spirit. This brings on the curses that are to get our attention. However, many continue to shun and avoid the scriptures due to the weaponization of it by religions, politicians, family, community, and others. This is why it is critical for each person to use their independent cognitive thinking abilities to search, analyze, examine themselves, the scriptures, and historical events, including in our ancestors' forefathers, to see who did what, why, and our takeaway for our spirit in moving forward in spirit and in truth. Avoiding accountability is damaging to our spirit and the manifestation thereof until we seek him out for ourselves. Hence is why we must study to show ourselves approved. Let's look at 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 15 and 16. Study to show thyself approved unto Yahuah, a workman that needs not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. But shun profane and vain babblings, for they will increase unto more ungodliness. This now brings us to our conclusion. Conclusion. All who endure the great tribulation and overcome the day of reckoning and judgment are accountable for that which they now know in spirit and in truth. If one cannot handle the truth, we know what spirit they are of, and that is the spirit of unrighteousness and darkness that will not dwell with those who acknowledge, are lovers of truth with a spirit of righteousness, to abide by the two greatest commandments for Yahweh's name's sake. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of Yahuah. Let's see what the word reveals to us regarding this matter. Daniel chapter 9 verses 11 through 19 conveys the following. Yea, all Israel have transgressed your law, even by departing, that they might not obey your voice. Therefore the curse is poured upon us, and the oath that is written in the law of Moses, the servant of Yahuah, because we have sinned against him. And he has confirmed his words, which he spoke against us, and against our judges that judged us, by bringing upon us a great evil, for under the whole heaven has not been done, as has been done upon Jerusalem. As it is written in the law of Moses, all this evil is come upon us, yet made we not our prayer before Yahuah our Aluah, that we might turn from our iniquities and understand your truth. Therefore has Yahuah watched upon the evil and brought it upon us. For Yahuah our Aluah is righteous in all his works which he does, for we obeyed not his voice. And now, O Adonai Aluah, that have brought your people forth out of the land of Egypt with a mighty hand, and hast gotten you renown, as at this day we have sinned, we have done wickedly. O Adonai, according to all your righteousness, I beseech you, let thine anger and your fury be turned away from your city Jerusalem, thy holy mountain, because for our sins and for the iniquities of our fathers, Jerusalem and thy people are become a reproach to all that are about us. Now therefore, O our Aluah, hear the prayer of thy servant and his supplications, and cause thy face to shine upon thy sanctuary that is desolate. For the Adonai's sake, O my Aluah, incline your ear, and hear, open your eyes, and behold our desolations, and the city which is called by your name. For we do not present our supplications before you for our righteousness, but for your great mercies. O Adonai, hear, O Adonai, forgive, O Adonai, hearken and do, defer not, for thine own sake, O my Aluah, for your city and your people are called by your name. So each of us are accountable for saving ourselves by the Mashiach in kingdom within us. Luke 17 verse 21. This is done through transforming our mind into righteousness, choosing righteousness in spirit and truth, taking the narrow gate on time and in season, laboring as an ambassador and ally of Yahuah, using critical independent thinking skills, understanding there is no cheat code, not being scatterbrained or double-minded, while using the Remnant Protocol in the wilderness without the camp. Each spiritual human being is their own worst enemy when it comes to their spirit and the manifestation of outcomes that derive from either their or their ancestors' spirit. When we understand these matters and address them properly through the blueprint given to us, we can be the member and vessel Yahuah requires of us. We must address the private and public enemies. Our mind has followed in the lower estate mind consciousness, as well as understanding the blessings and curses being used to purify and restore us unto righteousness for our individual and collective body. I want you to think about your spirit, and if you are accountable for your spirit under the tutelage of Yahuah and Yahusha, for their name's sake. May the peace of Yahuah, which passes all understanding, keep your hearts and minds through Mashiach Yahusha. That concludes today's lesson regarding accountability, and is the end of our series entitled, For Many Are Called, But Few Are Chosen. Shalom.